Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Ball Over Passion. I am your boy at George V underscore AFC. And we've got Chris and Curran here, a full house. We hope everybody is doing well on the interwebs. And we're doing well because it's Arsenal 1, Leicester nil. Good game, a very dominant game. I think just in general, um, there was a lot of people kind of nervous in just the emotions of the game. But if you have a look back, I feel it was one of our most dominant defensive performances of the season. A very fluid performance, I think, up until the final third, but otherwise quite a dominant 1-0 win. And there was a lot of good performances, but I think this was probably the best defensive performance from Arsenal, not just in the season, but also I think it's the lowest XG that has been recorded in a Premier League match since some of the Premier League XG accounts on Twitter have been created. So it definitely showed a very dominant level off the ball. But firstly, I'll ask Chris, how you doing? You good?
Yeah, I'm actually good. No one got it right again. With the predictions, I was kind of scared because we didn't score in the first half. So I was thinking, one of you guys is going to get it because 3 in the second half is a lot to ask. But yeah, it's probably our most dominant performance of the season, despite the scoreline. One shot, 72nd minute, from outside the box, as you said, 0.01 xG, the lowest the team has ever had in the Premier League. Leicester's lowest shots ever in a Premier League game. It's the third time we've done that to a team this season. Brentford, we limited them to 5 at home, their lowest ever as well. So yeah, another dominant performance. Great for the stats. I think we should have scored more goals, but apart from that, I can't really complain.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to talk about maybe some of the reasons why we struggled, in a sense, to create that same fluidity in the final third. But I do feel as though what has kind of gotten overlooked a little bit is the fact that we did get into Leicester's final third quite well, and there was some brilliant pieces of build-up play. And namely, we're going to talk about Trossard in terms of what he offered to help us change that, because I think he was definitely vital in making sure that there was a little bit more fluidity up in the top of the park, but also making sure that we could get out a little bit quicker, because there was a lot of great early switches that were done in this game. But I think maybe the first thing that we'll start with is, what did you guys feel with the lineups just in general? Of course, Thomas Partey made the squad, but of course not in. And of course, the Trossard sub was something different that we saw. So, I'll go first to Curran. A, how are you doing? I hope you're okay. But B, what did you think of the Trossard sub when you first saw it kind of in the lineup?
I mean, I'm still sick, but yeah, I'm doing all right. Just trooping through it. But in terms of the lineup and the substitution of Eddie off, I'm pretty sure that it's he's been carrying a knock, an ankle knock for the past couple of games, and it seems to have affected his performance in some people's eyes. For me, I don't really see it like that. I think there's clear movements that he hasn't been making that could really help us. I don't think it's a case of fitness, but in terms of what I made of Trossard coming in, we've been saying all along for this entire season on the channel is that we kind of run with a 2-striker system, except one is more of a wide, wide striker role that can that translate to a left wing. So basically, meaning that we need to get both players in areas in lanes 4 and 3 closer to the box, into the box, and get them into positions where they can shoot. And we saw with the goals we'll come on to, getting Martinelli into that central area, having Trossard rotate out, it was very crucial to produce that goal. And when you have players that are comfortable in all 3 lanes, i.e. the middle, 4 and 5, or basically in the middle, in the channel and out wide, it allows both of them to basically get to positions where they really adapt to well, and it puts them in position to succeed. You saw with the disallowed Trossard goal, his ability just to manipulate the ball around the box and get to his shot off. That's where we want him to be. We can't have him just out wide, and the rotations between the two, they seem to really get along well with each other. So yeah, I was happy. But in terms of the overall performance, just quickly, I would just like to say, because me and Chris were talking off air, and I'm pretty sure you were there as well, George. And Chris mentioned to me that he thought it was our our best performance of the season up to the final third. And I tend to agree with him. I think some of the way we worked out both in and out of possession was extremely good, and we didn't really give them a sniff. It kind of reminded me of the Brentford away game where we just were on them for the entire 90 minutes. They didn't really have a sniff of anything. So I really am happy with this performance. But yeah, the main thing for me was, can we have that sort of wide strike come second striker role be more prominent in this team? And that's what Trossard brought to the team.
I think what he offered was somebody having a +1 in the center of the park. One thing that we talked about with Gabriel Jesus is, look, we've faced teams that like to press us in terms of offering this kind of 5-4-1 or this packing the center, and they've been very physical on our wingers. And what Trossard was able to do that Eddie wasn't. Eddie is somebody that hangs on the shoulder of their last defender, whereas Trossard, we were saying, we needed a striker to come inside and offer himself in central spaces so that we could give a little bit more central running power. And that's exactly what Trossard did, particularly in the build-up. I thought Jorginho was very punchy between the lines, able to give some early balls out to Saka in zone 14. But again, when we reached kind of the final third, we did really struggle. Chris, I'll go to you. What did you think beyond just the fluid rotation of kind of Trossard and Martinelli, which of course it opened our left-hand side a bit, but one person that did struggle a little bit was kind of Granit Xhaka. And he had like a game of two halves where it was almost a case, in my opinion, where the first 70 minutes kind of show why some people want a different type of player in the final third. But then in the last 20 minutes, we saw why Granit Xhaka is so vital to the team in terms of a second ball retention. What did you feel kind of just generally was the difference of having a Trossard at striker, but then what that knock-on effect maybe had for Zinchenko and Xhaka in terms of the zones that they occupied?
Well, he dropped deep, or he dropped a lot more than Eddie would, sitting on the shoulder. So they had a lot less space to occupy. Two, they didn't have that pass, because recently, not even just recently, but Xhaka loves punching the ball into the striker and then making a run off that pass, and he didn't really have that option. I think we didn't have that focal point up top. I think Saka didn't necessarily have a good game. He didn't have a shot on target for the first time in 7 games. So I think Saka didn't have a really good game for the first time in a long time. And then with Martinelli and Trossard, they did combine well, but I think we were a bit inefficient in and around the box. I didn't think we created enough in and around the box. And with Xhaka, because of how deep Leicester really were, we didn't have any dribblers really. So it was just pass, rotate, pass, rotate, pass. And we only scored in transition, really. When they had a settled block, we struggled to get good shots off. And when we did, it was like Zinchenko taking the shot or Jorginho taking the shot rather than a Saka to take a good shot. And then we couldn't stretch them enough because of who was on the pitch, left wing and striker. So when you have that, it's really just in and around the box. Like Trossard was receiving on the edge of the box and not having space to go anywhere. So I think we couldn't stretch them, and then we didn't have the pinpoint final ball or the players in the box to go around that. So it was really just a transition to get a goal. Otherwise, I don't think maybe we would have scored.
Yeah, and I'll probably set us up because I feel as though that the first half, one thing that we did see was we did see kind of this inefficiency kind of in the final third, and I do think it was a matter of us basically having Zinchenko and Granit Xhaka step on each other's toes. We were asking a little bit more of Granit Xhaka to run in the spaces that were kind of vacated wide with this kind of setup, because of course Trossard, while he did operate sometimes as a false nine and build up, there were times that he would drift out to the left wing and allowed Martinelli a lot more central. And look, shock horror, he looked a little bit more dangerous when you had an ability for him to go through the center of the pitch. But one thing that we didn't really have, in my opinion, was we didn't have that kind of that final thrust in the final third, and it was still a little bit clunky. And the one thing that we were doing is we were taking pot shots. I think Bukayo Saka was receiving in space, and of course he had a couple of errant shots out wide outside of the box. But one of the big things was kind of that corner routine. And I'll go to Curran first. So when you have a look at kind of the goal that we do score with Trossard, underrated goal, by the way, brilliant finish. But in terms of just walking us through the goal, like what do you think gave us the breakthrough, and maybe give your opinion on kind of the Ben White holding of the hand? We'll touch on it really quickly because I don't want to do too much on the ref stuff. But what did you make kind of the goal, the disallowed goal rather, to start us off with at around the 25th minute?
I mean, the only thing I'm going to say, and I'm with you. I don't want to spend ages on the refs. Is consistency, consistency, consistency. If you don't give the goal that Douglas Luiz scores against us, then you have to give us the goal that Ben White apparently messes up for us. I mean, Ramsdale was literally being held by I can't remember who it was. I think it was Kamara.
No, it was
Correct me if I'm wrong. Who was it?
Watkins.
Watkins, thank you. If it was Ollie Watkins, right? He's held. If Ben White can't shake someone's hand, it's not the same. It's not the same amount of contact, and I don't understand the consistency. I don't understand how we're reffing these games. And the similar thing with the penalty shout. I mean, if we could just get as many points as we could, PGMOL apologies, it would really appreciate that, guys. But it's ridiculous. But in terms of the goal itself, look, we've all said on the channel about Trossard's ball striking and his ability to affect the game inside the box, manipulating the ball, mazing through a couple of challenges and getting the shot off before top bins. What a finish. Very good inside the box. His ball manipulation on point and just getting a great shot off. So yeah, annoyed, but look, we got the 3 points in the end. And if it wasn't, dear God, 2 clear shouts in that first half, a penalty and a disallowed goal. Deary me.
I mean, I'll go to Chris too to see kind of your thoughts on it just generally. The biggest thing that I think that I love to see was actually the finish in Trossard, and maybe I'll let you go into like if your thoughts on the Ben White holding of the hand. But for me, he does a little stutter step to kind of almost freeze the defenders before he releases that shot top corner. And when you do have a look at it, we have had an opportunity for us to score at the top of the box many times, but certain players haven't been clinical. We've even had a conversation about their probability out of 10. What we felt like they would score. But I just think Trossard offers us a little chance to kind of go into why he's so clinical in the box and what he does do to open himself up for that top corner strike. It's beautiful. It's an excellent ball strike. It's clean. The technique is excellent, but he does take that extra step that when Granit Xhaka releases it to him, he isn't hitting it first time. And I just feel that extra composure in the final third is what we were missing all game, but also people at the top of the box have lacked that for us this season. And for some reason, we seem to rush that final action. Trossard shows you consistently with his touches in the box, there's short little openings that he sets himself up for the best possible strike. I think that we can use that in other areas of our season. What did you make kind of that goal? Did you agree with me in terms of he does something a little bit different with his technique? Or are you also just as mad about Ben White's hand-holding that we need to address it more?
Well, it was a perfect finish. Couldn't really put any more top corner. He just took 2 touches. Suter and Pratt were closing in on him, so he took an extra touch instead of just that first one, and then he just put it top corner. I think he was a lot more composed than the other players we have taken that shot. He knew exactly where he wanted to put it. Our other players just snatched that chance, I think. And I think it was good corner technique to have him just waiting on the edge of the box, because usually we have Zinchenko there. And obviously he did score versus Villa, but he does put a lot of his shots over the bar. So it was nice to have someone with a great finish. And then with the with the disallowed goal, I just don't think it should have been disallowed. He was just holding his hand. The keeper was still able to get his hand on the ball anyways. So he wasn't really impeded. And then we've seen it happen week on week on week, not even just in Arsenal games, where they allow that stuff to happen, like in Tottenham games, in Chelsea games, like Chelsea versus West Ham. So we do see that stuff happen regularly, and they just let it go. But like, it's annoying at this point to keep talking about refs, because we're still having to win despite them, and we're going to have to win. And if we do want to win the league, we're going to have to keep putting up performances despite the refs. And next week, or Wednesday, we're going to have another chance to talk about when a ref should have done the right thing. And then it's going to happen on the weekend. It's going to happen next week and the week after. So at this point, it is what it is. And it shouldn't be, but it just is what it is. but it was a great finish. It couldn't have been any better.
Yeah, no, it was an excellent finish, and I agree with you. Like, I don't really want to talk about the rest because I think, from a most part, it's just about consistency. Like, if you have a look at it, I think there was Douglas Luiz's foul as well in the weekend that was potentially similar. And when you compare the two, and then with Saka's penalty claim, it's just a little bit ridiculous here. So I don't really want to go into it. But I do think that finish was excellent. And then we kind of move on, guys, into the first half, where I think, despite us not really having the most of being clinical in the final third, I still think that our buildup was phenomenal for many points in the match. And the big person I wanted to shout out was Gabriel, and I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts were on his performance. For me, definitely somebody that had a shout, and not just shout, but for me was man of the match. You know, I think he's come into his own. He's been one of the most consistent left center backs since the end of October, beginning of November, and if you're talking about a defensive performance where you only limit the opposition to 0.01 xg, you can't not talk about Gabriel's absolute composure in this game. I mean, his involvement for the goal is understated. Some people might say that's a wild chip right off the bat in terms of him just hitting and hoping down the channel, but no, he knows that Trossard is going to be in there. He's doing it by sending a message on his pass to tell him to take it and run. Don't cut back. Don't check yourself. And I think that he was just very dominant all game. We'll go to you, Karen, first, mate. Like, what did you make of Gabriel's performance generally? Because I felt as though he was absolutely monstrous in this game from a defensive point of view, but also an organization of our defensive line. Like, what did you make of his ability to impact the match?
I mean, we identified in the preview about the threat that Tete could produce on that right hand side. Zinchenko obviously is more higher up the pitch, but as you mentioned, the ability to marshal that line, keep it on point, make sure that we aren't dropping too low or missing offsides where we could catch them offside, really marshalling that back line, making sure that him and Saliba have basically track back on time, cover each other, make sure that he's keeping the ball in possession as well. But you saw, even in the box, his ability to time his tackles. There was one that went out for a corner where he follows the man, and sticks his foot out at the perfect time, and concedes the corner, but really, really times it perfectly where there's not even a chance that they can think of a penalty. Obviously, there's that clip going around of the sea of red that comes back in out of possession. But the main thing for me was making sure that right hand side was kept down, because the play between Iheanacho and Tete, if they had actually been able to get going, it could have basically created that overload on the right to release Barnes on the left, and we could have potentially had some issues there. But the way that Gabriel marshaled that side and made sure that they were shut down really helped us in this game, and really helped us basically push the tempo in the opposite direction, because winning the ball back, turning it over, and really pushing the ball at a great tempo. You mentioned earlier about switches. Someone that was great at on Saturday was Gabriel. His ability to loft the ball, because we've been talking about it on the channel a lot, about lofting the ball, trying to play over teams when they play low blocks, not just be able to play through them, but create those switches, create those over the top balls. And the way that Gabriel and Saliba, to his credit, both of them were switching the ball, really helped us in possession. Obviously, Jorginho, we've mentioned as well about his punching between the lines passing, but in terms of Gabriel specifically, great in possession, great out possession, great communication, a really good performance, and hopefully he's not too mad with Saliba afterwards. But yeah, that's another funny thing that came out of this game. Apparently, we have no team unity despite being the most united team in the league. But yeah, we move.
We do move, and Chris, I wanted to get your thoughts kind of on the Gabriel performance, but also I'll lean in to give you a little bit more meat, mainly on Jorginho as well, in terms of how we've changed playing. So there was a moment in the first half, I don't know if you guys remembered, but there was a quick break with Iheanacho kind of breaking in a wide channel. I think it was around the 35th minute mark, and the speed to which everybody from an Arsenal perspective got behind the ball in terms of that 1v1 press was just absolutely phenomenal. I don't think this is just a Jorginho thing. There were some conclusions on the timeline that made me think, oh, look, with Jorginho playing, the players are a lot more conscious of that and they're being quicker. I don't really agree. One of the best parts of Arsenal this season has been our 1v1 press off the ball. And I just think that Jorginho or not, that team is doing this consistently this season. And that has been our special sauce. Our ability to get numbers quickly and in magnitude behind the ball, very quick in transitions, is why we have been probably the best transition control team in this league this season. So what did you make kind of Jorginho's performance in terms of how we've slightly adapted our ability to kind of still keep control of those transitions? Has it been Gabriel and Saliba meeting their markers a little bit more aggressively, or has it been a kind of a collective effort from the team to really make sure that we keep those distances tight as much as we can? Even though against Villa, I don't think we could always say that. That Villa goal was traumatic in terms of what we've offered this season, but I don't think we gave Leicester as many opportunities where our lines were different. I do think that Mikel got into them in training this season. But what did you make kind of Jorginho's performance kind of between the lines himself on the ball?
Well, it's one of the first times in a long time that someone had more passes than Zinchenko in our team. He was very prevalent on the ball. In the first half, I think he had 48 passes. Obviously, in the second half, we didn't have as much control of the ball. We had the ball a bit higher up, and then we scored so early, and then we just sat back for the last 10 or like last 5. So we didn't really have the same domination on the ball. But yeah, he had a very good game. I think off the ball, we did help him, but you have to help your players' deficiencies. Like, we know if he has the ball and loses it, we're in a much worse position than probably anyone else, just because of his lack of like explosiveness and physicality to win the ball back, and of how he does go into tackles. He does go in very not weak isn't the word, but he just like lets things go. But I think he had a very good game. I think also Gabriel was my man in the match as well. I think he was incredible. As you said, he had a big involvement in the goal. He did intend to make that pass. It was an interception at first that he made, go straight to Trossard.
Trossard, yeah, who Megs the suitor, I think it is.
Yeah, and what's his name? Iheanacho was even laughing on the offside. He was like, wow. They were even speaking like, wow, how did you play me off? Because he did play him off. He stepped up to play him offside. So Gabriel, again, great game. I don't remember the last time he had a poor performance, but no. Well, now people are speaking about it, but it's great to see the difference, because now the 27th of February is completely different to what people were saying about him at the start of the season. They were saying Saliba is on a different level to him and all that stuff. So yeah, he's a quality defender, probably the best 1v1 defender in the league right now, the best indoors, and no one can say anything about him right now. He's got, as someone said, he's got his hair back and his confidence back as well.
Yeah, and look, there's something that I wanted to ask I'll ask you guys both, because there's one thing that I noticed in the second half, kind of around the 50th minute mark. There was a couple chances where Odegaard started drifting towards the left-hand side, and I will not stop to pat myself on the back. Everybody knows that on the channel. So Odegaard in the left half space, we've seen this connection with Martinelli in terms of it before.
Brighton away.
Yeah, we've seen the potential of having kind of a creative profile on the inside and what a straight line runner can be in terms of how complementary that is. What did you make kind of the second half of Martin Odegaard kind of moving slightly to have more of like left-hand side bias, where he's released Martinelli a couple times, not just for the disallowed goal, but even prior to that, there was times where, he was taking a quick free kick on the left and making sure to drive really in that left half space. Are we seeing inklings of maybe a transition in terms of the midfield roles of this team? And of course, Emile Smith-Rowe getting an academy appearance at right central midfielder. I thought that wasn't his best position, but it's shocking that he's got 45 minutes there from the academy. But Curran, what did you make kind of Martin kind of moving over a little bit more to the left, kind of in the second half?
First of all, right, let's get this straight. Can you stop smiling like you're in some sort of crazy like Twilight Zone? Oh my god, everything's going my way. It's okay. We know, we get it. We are right here. We're all right, because like, we've been saying it on the channel for a while. You've been saying it a lot on Twitter as well about how this has been the move. I think it's the move.
Okay, I'm gonna let you have your opportunity to speak on it. But I remember getting into so many fights on Twitter, and it comes down to the reason is because you need to understand how best to utilize your squad. And I don't think people are doing this. They're too dead set on what they see. I.e., look at Ben White. He was center back. There's no way, George, that he can be a right back. Well, no. Look at his traits. Look at his central running power. Look at his dynamism, his crossing variety,
Look
how
at where he's
composed he is in the final third. Those are traits that a fullback would be excellent in. Shock horror, he transitions and he's one of the best right backs in the league this season. When you look at Martin Odegaard, so I'll kind of add a little bit of context instead of just straight narcissism padding. What is it about Martin Odegaard's ability in the final third that is better on the left than it is on the right? Like, why is it that we are seeing a little bit more success with that and he's moved there? Why do you think that theory has water?
All right, can I answer now? Yeah, cool. So for me anyway, the profiles on our wingers suggest that it's better to have Emil on the right and Odegaard on the left. You look, as you mentioned, having a straight line runner in Martinelli allows Odegaard to play those through balls he likes playing through so much. It also allows Martinelli to get into more central areas because Odegaard will also, as he's been doing on the right, will pull wide at times and cross in from not only the half space but also a bit wider. You look at the right side as well. You have Saka, who loves coming inside and getting into the box and affecting the.
And kind of affecting the play. But Chris, do you want to take over?
Yeah, I think Odegaard on the left. One main reason I've liked it is one, it forces him to make a decision. There's less angles open to him, and I think at times he always he'd look for the pass first, or he'd get an opportunity to. There'll be a perfect pass right there, but then he'd see so much that it maybe muddle him up a bit, just like me there. I think he could have played passes earlier, and I think that versus Brighton earlier in the season where he won 4-2, 4-3? I forgot the score, but he played a beautiful pass first time to Martinelli deep in the half space that he wouldn't play on the right. I just think on the left he takes a lot less time to make his decision. I think he makes better passes when it obviously opens up different angles to him. And we've seen Arteta play lefties there the whole season, and recently he's been putting Fabio Vieira there, who is a similar profile to Odegaard, but again, he wants the half space crossing there. Someone who's able to dictate play from that position. We've known that the whole time, and I think having a right centre mid like Smith Rowe, everyone knows I'd prefer, and they say I hear Odegaard for preferring Smith Rowe there, but I think having a dribbler, having a person who's willing to run on the outside is much more beneficial to someone like Saka, rather than someone who plays off the shoulder like Martinelli. It's more beneficial to just have someone like Odegaard next to him. As you said, it's better to utilize your squad with the pieces they need near them. And our best combination players should be together on the right. And our best runner and our best passer from deep should be together on the left. It's really as simple as that.
Well, and I think when you talk about controlling transitions, it's about understanding kind of where you need to be on the pitch. And again, people won't like to see this, but a Martin Odegaard transition to the left does mean that you don't really need a Zinchenko in that area controlling from that side of the pitch. You need to understand that we can't be putting players that want to be doing the same things on the pitch in the same areas of the pitch. And so it will need a little bit of adjustment. You may have, Zinchenko, that rule switching to somebody that's a little bit more physical in duels to supplement it. Because when you do have a Martin Odegaard there that has a lot more ingenuity in the final third and has a lot more tempo control, what you do need on that side is a little bit more physicality and thrust. And so, yes, that does mean a return for a certain Scotsman that everybody thinks is horrible. But that means that the balance is there. Okay. And I think that has to be the question that we're talking about. And while Gabriel Jesus is certainly on his way back, in fact, I think he's going to be back this week. We might not see him for Everton. I do think that Bournemouth is an opportunity to see Gabby Jesus. But in terms of controlling the transitions from that side of the pitch, when you've got 2 8s that are a little bit more attack minded, you need to compare them with the side that is going to have a little bit more of dynamism in the wide areas, because right now when you do have a midfield of Martin Odegaard and maybe Emil Smith Rowe as your double 8s, you've got some central running power there, but what you do lack are the compactness in duels and the second ball retention. So look, Thomas Partey can't do everything, and what it does do is it maybe allows Ben White to have a little bit more of a sitting role kind of in that middle third, and what it does allow is kind of Thomas Partey to cheat a little bit to the left, and that's when you end up getting kind of that kind of stability in your transitions, because Emil Smith Rowe can offer that dynamic overlap on the right all day long. And so it allows Saka to become inside. You fill your lanes perfectly fine, and Ben White can stay deeper a little bit. And we don't ask him to be so much the wide outlet. And he can do it and go when he can. But then ultimately, it means that the players that are in that position end up doing things that they prefer. Emile Smith-Rowe is a central running monster. He prefers running with the ball in central areas. He's a quick combo player with Bukayo Saka, and we get Saka more on the inside. That works for him. When you look at Martin Odegaard, somebody again who we've had a revival at points in the season, he has at times struggled to kind of release the ball. We all know that this is the biggest criticism. There's three things with Martin Odegaard that I want him to do more of, and that is A, make quicker decisions, release the pass a little bit more, shoot more, be a more aggressive. And all those things get solved by putting him on the left because, as you said, Chris, like the angles are different, but they're reduced. Like that's the reason he makes those decisions quicker because if he doesn't release them at that point in time, he ends up putting himself in a weaker position to turn. And he also, another thing that it also stops is he can't turn backwards on the left. That is one thing that I haven't seen people see. His natural inclination is to recycle the ball. On the right, when you receive the ball on your left foot, you're able to go backwards quite quickly. When you do receive on the left, you can't use your left foot to recycle as quickly. You'd have to use your right foot to do that. And he's not comfortable using his weak foot. We kind of established that. So what it forces him to do is to release the ball quicker, to release it in space. And that's why you get the Leeds point. That's why you get, even in this game, there were times when he absolutely released quickly. And so he's definitely somebody that has the energy to complete the press. So I'm not worried from that perspective. It's more about being successful in that. And so you do need maybe somebody with Gabriel's ability, but also a left back that has that kind of physical dual monster ability so that we can offer a little bit more control in our second balls a little bit deeper if you're going to play those 2-8s. But again, something that we saw a little bit in the second half. But Curran, you're back. I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about the Martin Odegaard left half space before we move on, because he had an excellent opportunity in the 60th minute before the goal that got disallowed, where he has a free kick, and Gabriel does a pretty decent header. I think he can do a little bit more. He's kind of suffered recently aerially, and I don't think I'm worried
Twice
about it.
now. The Villa game as well. He had a header that he kind of just overthought. But yeah, what I was trying to say is Emile is better on the overlap, and it gives Saka the bit inside to come in, whereas Odegaard being able to find crosses from the half space or a bit wider can produce those crosses on his left and get the whip on the ball to get it in the box, or find those little through balls from Martinelli that he likes to grab onto. So that was the point I was trying to get across before my laptop decided to betray me. On his left half space ability, I just think that we've seen for so long, especially with Vieira as well, because it does tie into Fabio Vieira. Because if you're talking about left space, half space ability and half space competency, you have to talk about Fabio Vieira, because what has Fabio Vieira been able to do so well is he's been able to find crosses from either half space to the back post, and that's where we want to be where we want to have players attacking. And when you're playing in the left half space and you're using your left foot to get that whip on the ball, to get that whip into the box, it gives him that ability to find players at both boxes, be creative, and really get his maybe get a few more assists. So left central midfield I think is where he should be going. And in terms of controlling transitions, I just think that I think the main thing is we have the main reason why we do so well at controlling transitions is because we have those three men basically in the second line of our build-up. So that 2-3-5, the three there are there to control. And it will, say you have Xhaka in the left centre midfield, you have Emile in the right centre midfield, it allows Xhaka to drop a bit further back. You can have him control the second balls and win his duels. But he hasn't been great either with his I think something's been a bit off with him lately. I think he's missing Jesus a bit. I don't know what it is. There's a confidence lack from him in the last couple of games.
Well, I want to talk on that because I have an answer. It's because of where he's receiving the ball, and it's 10 to 15 yards deeper than where he was at the start of the season. With Gabby Jesus, when you've got a striker that's able to kind of overload on the sides, what it allows for Granit Xhaka to do is be more of the final action player. Right now, with kind of Eddie Nketiah being on the last line of his defender and kind of with Gabby Martinelli consistently being the touchline option, it forces Granit Xhaka to play deeper, because if he was to make those runs to be in the box to finish moves, then you're leaving a huge gap for Zinchenko to cover space, and we know that Zinchenko in space is not something that we want to do and encourage. So in combination with Jorginho at the base of your midfield with that ask, it means that Granit Xhaka doesn't feel he can be as adventurous with his off-the-ball running. And when you do that, then you basically ask him to operate 10 to 15 yards deeper, which is not something that Granit Xhaka can do well. And we know that. So that's really the biggest reason I think that Granit Xhaka is struggling. But moving on, Chris, I think in the 70th minute, there was a stat that's going around. Arsenal at that point in the match had an 86% passing accuracy with 521 passes, while Leicester only had 199 passes with an accuracy of 66%. What did you make kind of that second half performance just in general? And maybe highlight what you felt that Kieran Dewsbury Hall was able to do in his little cameo. I think that he was probably the best player for Leicester. Maybe Faze, you could argue, but I do think that, there were times that we isolated him. What did you make kind of the dominance of that kind of second half performance? Because while we weren't clinical, I don't think there was a time that I ever felt worried that, in transition, that, Leicester could nick something, because they did have subs that introduced, Jamie Vardy, and they went a lot more aggressive with Patson Daka going a 4-4-2. And our change did mean that Granit Xhaka became a lot more important in terms of his second ball retention. So everything that we criticized him for in the first half, it was void, because he was very vital in that second half to really assist in making sure that we kept control of the match. What did you make kind of the last 20 minutes in terms of Leicester's response to the 4-4-2 and kind of how we responded?
I think naturally, with their team, whenever Vardy gets on the pitch, they get a lot more confident in transitions. They play the ball over the top a lot more. Barnes was seeing the ball a lot more. I think with the first half, they lacked a Maddison. They lacked someone ready to just hit the ball very hard into Barnes's feet and put him 1v1 a lot more earlier, because they were putting him 1v1, allowing Saka to drop deeper, allowing Odegaard to drop deeper and double up on him much quicker than Maddison would allow. And just like we saw versus United, he was allowed inside a lot more, allowed the space between the centre-backs and the DM, and he killed United there. He should have scored himself. He should have got an assist for Iheanacho as well. They should have scored 2 goals in the first 30 minutes. Obviously, De Gea did have a great performance that night, but they should have scored as well. But against us, they didn't get that space, especially in the first half. But in the second half, after the goal and the way it was scored, it forced Leicester to step up the pitch. At only 1-0, they felt they still had a chance to grab something, because it's only 1-0. You can still get a goal. So they chanced. They went 4-4-2, and with Xhaka and with the way they play with both of the strikers trying to get off the shoulder, there's going to be a lot of headed down balls from Gabriel. He won 2 out of the 2s of his aerial duels, and Xhaka won a lot of his duels. I think 80%. I forgot the exact number, but he won a lot of his duels in the second half as well. And it was necessary, just because the way the game went and the way we scored so early, 46th minute, I think it was. Scoring so early just completely changed the dynamic, and us not doubling up that allowed them to think they can get in. So yeah, Xhaka was incredibly important. Gabriel as well. Obviously Saliba. But yeah, I think we dealt with the 1v1 that they tried to put Barnes in very well, and he wasn't decisive enough. And then with Dewsbury Hall, that was a good shot. Like, for that to be the one shot of the game, it is a good shot from outside the box. Ramsdale thought it was going in, but they didn't create enough, I don't think. They didn't have enough intent offensively. And we, as I said, it is our best game in the first 2/3, on and off the ball, offensively and defensively. I think it's our best game up until the box, like the whole season. Because I never, as you said, you would just never felt they'd score at all at one point in the game, and I didn't. So yeah, it was dominant, but both teams, they could have done a lot better to create, I think, even without Maddison.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll go to Curran, mate, for kind of some of your last thoughts about what you felt was the best part of the match. What did you think in terms of the 1v1 press? Because I think generally there was a lot of promising situations that, we did scuffle at times. I think Granit Xhaka and Martin Odegaard in the first 45 minutes did struggle in terms of some of their decision making. But up to that, the defensive performance from our press was unbelievable. And I make note of it because ever since, Everton, Brentford, and, Man City, that press hasn't been consistently done. This was the first game back that we didn't do it in patches. I would argue even against Villa, we did it for a half, but this was the first 90-minute return to the press. What did you think was so key to us being able to sustain that kind of intensity for 90 minutes? Was it the introduction of Trossard, or was it just a shift in mentality from the boys to kind of be a little bit more aggressive in terms of their off-the-ball movement and marking?
Well, for me, you mentioned Trossard. I think Trossard gave you a different pressing option. I feel like Eddie is much more on the keeper a lot more. I feel like Trossard is much more. I mean, I'll ask you guys as well because this is how I saw it. For me, Trossard was very much chasing after, going after centre backs. He wasn't really too concerned about Ward himself. He was very, very concerned about just going ball side centre back and try to force the ball long instead of trying to cut off the goalkeeper in when he's getting the ball passed back to him. Was very much a different approach to it. In terms of the mentality, I feel like our triggers in knowing when to drop off were very, very good. We timed our drop very well, as in retreating back into our own shape. Because this is what happens when you have Jorginho in the team. When you have Jorginho in the team, you have to be much more aware of when you drop, because if you leave him isolated, it will mean that we're exposed. So I think we were much more cautious of when to drop and obviously you had, as I mentioned earlier, the Dewsbury Hall quote about us, the sea of red coming back, and they're just being properly aware of us just retreating into our block. But that was the main thing. The triggers for dropping, I think, were very good. I think a different approach in our frontline press was interesting. I think we were much more okay with letting Ward kick out instead of putting him under pressure to try and just switch play quickly. Whereas with United, for example, we were much more on De Gea, so we would make a mistake and kick the ball out into touch. With Ward, I think we were more trying to just get him to launch instead of trying to play out the back. I think that was what we were trying to do, win the second balls and come back at him again. So it's a different approach, but I do like how we treated this pressing performance.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of just give Chris your opportunity to kind of talk about the press just really briefly, because I don't know if you noticed, but we went 1v1 primarily throughout the match, and we kind of know this, right? Like, we do this generally speaking. This isn't new, but we kind of baited their center backs and forced them to play the long ball option, and there was a lot of times that either Martinelli or Zinchenko were very aggressive in the wide areas, making sure to try to force interceptions, and it wasn't just them, it was Gabriel. Everybody kind of allowed Leicester to play out the back, but cut their passing lane options. And as soon as the ball went out wide, there was an aggressive attempt by Arsenal to really clamp down on any passing. And that kind of changed when, I think they kind of vacated the wide areas and they realized it wasn't working. And around the 70th minute, Brendan Rodgers introduces his, two striker system. Sorry. And he tries to go a little bit more vertical. And our response was going into more of a 4-5-1 block. We went still 1v1, but we became a little bit more zonal in terms of how we defended. And it basically made the attempt of Leicester to try to play over us, which with our athletes in terms of center back was just not happening. What did you make kind of that slight tweak from Arsenal that once kind of, Jorginho went down, he needed treatment kind of in the stoppage. But, after that, we kept becoming aggressive. And of course, we had Thomas Partey come in to help us close out the game. But what did you make kind of the press for 90 minutes? Because I do think in the best defensive performance of the season by Arsenal, the star is and will always be the press. And I think it was the first time in the last 5 games, really, that we've gone 90 minutes in this press aggression. What did you make of that?
Well, we forced mistakes and we forced matchups that we thought were favorable. Like, I didn't think we would, but we wanted Barnes, Ben White. Like, we wanted that matchup. We wanted them to ping the ball that side to Dewsbury Hall and Didi in the midfield. 1, because we knew we'd win the duels, but 2, because we knew they'd make their decision to release Barnes late. So it would allow us to double up on him easy, and he'd either rotate the ball or cut into his left foot and play a nothing cross, and we just retrieve the ball. So I was surprised by that. I didn't think we'd won that matchup a lot. And then we won. I think the matchups we highlighted, before the game is what we wanted, really. Obviously, Face had a good game, but I think in midfield, we knew we could win the duels. And yeah, the press was incredible with Trossard and Martinelli rotating. They weren't always wide, and Martinelli wasn't always wide. Sometimes he was up top, and we did very well to force them to make decisions that they didn't want to make. And again, they didn't have a Maddison that was so composed under pressure that was able to quickly make decisions. So they lacked someone that they could give the ball to in times of danger, in times of like fear, to make a quick decision to get a goal or assist, or just to put someone in a good position. So with them lacking that, and then Tete got frustrated as the game went on. He started to foul. Iheanacho got taken off, but Tete was probably the key person we marked out of the game. He didn't really have a lot of joy. He didn't really have a lot of touches, and he just made fouls. So yeah, the press, again, you can't have a great defensive game without the press being so good, and you can't have 70% possession without being able to win the ball back. So yeah, I think defensively we were great the whole 90 minutes, really.
Yeah, and look, there's not too much to really come off of in terms of a tactical analysis from the game. The one thing that I wanted to end on before we kind of sign off, guys, is the Graham Potter comments in terms of comparing himself with the situation at Arteta. Because I think, look, it's excellent. We've got ourselves now into a 1-0 position with Leicester. We're still absolutely in this title race, and we've got a lot of games upcoming that we're going to have to be very consistent in. We've got a run of home games that are going to be very important for us looking forward. And I think it's just Fulham away in terms of away matches in the Premier League for the month of March. And the rest are home. And so that's going to be very important for us to keep it a cauldron. But, the Graham Potter comments about comparing himself both to Klopp and Arteta's situation, what did you guys make of those comments just generally? Because Arteta is going to be the absolute reference point, and also Arsenal are going to be the reference point for new projects going into next season and kind of abroad. But I keep saying this to people. I don't think people realize how absolutely insane it is what Arsenal are doing. We are the outlier. This is not normal.
Well, it's
Okay,
not the first time. It's not the first time we've said that this is what was going to happen. We said it before anyone even saw this project going boom, like Arteta said it would in 2020. We said it when the channel started that eventually this will be a reference for when a manager is nearly about to get sacked. Give him time. Look at Arteta. Give him time. Look at Arsenal. Arsenal gave Arteta time, but your time has to be justified. And even if the mass can't see it, the club saw it. Kroenke wanted Arteta since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
We knew what he was in the game of football. Pep was asking him for advice when Arteta was a footballer at Arsenal. So he was an elite man in football before we knew he'd become a coach. Like before we knew he'd become a coach, we knew what he'd become, but he implemented things early into Arsenal from the first day that are still in play now. And Potter hasn't done that at Chelsea. And he spent a lot less money and all this stuff. So he was always going to get that. Like being a young manager on the rise, he was always going to get an Arteta shout or a Klopp shout like he needs to try to keep him in the job. But yeah, it's just a big testament to Arteta, to what he's done. Because before people were Arteta out. Now it's one of the best managers of the league this season. And everyone needs to look at him and emulate what he's done, just like what everyone's saying we should do with Liverpool.
Well, look, people have narcissistically said trust the process. Curran, I want to give you a chance. Like, what are your thoughts in terms of the comparisons that he made? Because he did compare himself to both Arteta and Klopp, which are vastly different situations. And I think that it's incredibly naive to even compare yourself to such situations when you haven't had any sort of the same success as those two coaches at the start of their career. Arteta won a cup in his first 6 months. However, as much as people want to hammer him for his league form, he won a cup in his first kind of season. Klopp, while he didn't win a cup, he got himself to finals. Both of those club managers that you're comparing yourselves to have a little bit of a case of get your wife's name out of my mouth, aka Will Smith. Like, why are you comparing yourself to such different situations when you've spent £600 million and broken the individual transfer record in consecutive windows, both in the summer and the January transfer window, are both consecutively broken transfers? So what did you make kind of those comments and kind of the comparison to ourselves? Because we're going to do it too with United, by the way. Make no mistake about it. Rivals are going to be doing the exact same thing in terms of their rebuilds and comparing it to ourselves because we are the benchmark. But what did you make of the Graham Potter comments really quickly?
No, we're gonna have some facts here. We're gonna do some straight facts. We're not gonna do any rubbish here. We're going to do this properly, and we're gonna have this out because this is a nonsense claim from Graham Potter. It's complete fabrication that he has done anything compared to what we have. Same with Ten Hag. It's absolute nonsense. Okay, Ten Hag. When we started the channel, boys, right? When we started the channel and Ole was at the wheel, as it were, where were United meant to finish? First, second, something around there. They were in a title race. Ronaldo was back. Everything was back. Everything was great. The United were back, right? Then they got sacked. Then Ragnick came in. They're going to go on that run. Top 4 coming. They got that picture with all those little fixtures, this stupid mug there. We've got all these easy fixtures. Watford, all these fixtures, one after the other. Draws to Wolves. All these silly fixtures. And then they come in and they finish below us. And then I just don't understand where you can say, okay, well, a process now, because he's done it in 6 months. He's done it in 6 months, great. But the main reason we're talking is Graham Potter. So I'm just going to read out something here. Very simple. Bournemouth 1, Arsenal 1. 2019, December, I think it was Boxing Day 2019. The Arsenal lineup. Bird Leno, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Socrates, David Luiz, Bukayo Saka, Lucas Torreira, Granit Xhaka, Reece Nelson, Mesut Ozil, Aubameyang, and Lacazette. And you go to Chelsea's lineup. This is his first lineup. Okay, this isn't the now we've got all the transfers in. This is before he got his backing in the January window. Kepa, Aspi, Thiago Silva, Cucurella, Reece James, Mason Mount, Jorginho, Kovacic, Sterling, Aubameyang, and Havertz. Most of those 11 won a Champions League together. Okay, this is not the same situation. We're not playing a pivot of Torreira and Xhaka here. Okay, this is not how this works. The situations are completely different. The investment is completely different. In 2 windows, Bowley has spent more than the whole of Arteta's reign. And we're talking about what? Oh, the processes are similar. They're not similar. You've now got a squad where you're not looking at identifying profiles that could form a core unit that would lead you into a next era of your football team. You're just looking at hijacks. You're looking at pathetic scrounging around of youth players to try and one up and get, we won the transfer window. That's not how this works. You win points on the pitch. You don't win them in the transfer window. Okay, so there's nothing is the same here. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. They've got all these amortized transfers. Enzo, they've bought in as a 6. They haven't. I was saying earlier today, if you would record Ethan Ampadu and then bought Enzo, then it makes sense. Or buy Luiz to pay with Carney and Mount. Have some sort of consistency about profiles. Make sure that you understand who's going to work together. How are we going to do these things? Having squad sessions of over 30 players, how is that going to work? Like, there's no cohesion here. There's no ability to look into the future. Look for what we need to do in the next 2 windows, next 3 windows. How are we going to compete for Champions Leagues, for Premier Leagues, for these kinds of competitions? So I don't understand what the thinking is. I mean, I said to you, and you said, we both said to each other, when I did my Enzo thread, I said maybe he could play a 6, and you were like, no. And I was like, you know what? You're right. No, he can't play a 6.
I was vehemently. I had predicted this because look, I had watched Enzo very closely.
Yeah, I know, and I did too.
I loved Marcelo Gallardo, and I've been and I've been a huge fan of his teams, and I know Enzo Fernandez quite well. And I told everybody this is the farthest thing from a six. He's going to be ripped apart. He's going to be dribbled past, and he's going to be exposed because Marcelo Gallardo had a partner next to him in a 4-4-2 because of his off the ball tendencies. Now,
Correct.
it's not just Enzo, but part of the problem is I'm going to lay some facts about Graham Potter's reign right now because right now there's a lack of planning, and he himself is digging himself a hole. Not just the environment, by the way. There's just no footballing authority that has come in.
Put in a situation where he can't succeed.
There is that, but also he is shooting himself in the foot. He has gone from a back three to a back four and vice versa multiple times in his reign already. He has not had a set way of playing. There is nobody there that has done the Per Mertesacker and Marcel Lucassen route of saying, what is the Chelsea way? What kind of football and style do we want to play? And then how do we recruit in order to make that style shine? They have not done that. They've just bought a bunch of names and they have hoped that Graham Potter can do something about it. But at the same time, Graham Potter has not had any authority in how he wants to play. It gives you a very Unai Emery vibe where a lot of the players lose respect for you. If you don't know how you want to play and you're going to change the rules of the team so consistently and you don't have a clear thought, you lose your authority in the dressing room. And that is what's happening right now with Graham Potter. And for however much he's a talented coach, he is not succeeding as a talented manager. And those two things are very different because right now he has no clear idea of how he wants to play. There's no clear idea from the board about how they envision themselves as wanting to play. And lastly, they don't trust their academy. By having a Cobham Academy in comparison to Hale End, it's probably one of the best in the country, if not the best in the country. You certainly can make an argument for that.
Just give me a sec. You spend 40 million euros on Badiashile and Colwills on loan. You have just that transfer in a nutshell sums up Todd Bowley and this current regime. You have one of the best young centre-back talents in Europe on loan right now. And instead of integrating him, instead of bringing him in and being like, okay, we're going to put you as one of my core members of this Graham Potter era. We need to like when Arteta came in, he identified Xhaka, he identified Saka. These were the guys that he was going to run this project through. These were his leaders. These were the people that his core members of his squad that he wants to make sure to take us into the future, to take us into the next era. Who is that for Graham Potter? There is no one. He hasn't got someone. Cucurella? Seriously, what are we doing? I don't understand what the process is here.
And fundamentally, I'm just going to end on this. In order to compare yourselves to Arsenal, I hate this idea that it was luck. Yes, we are an outlier. Yes, it is a 2%, but we did everything the right way. Before even Mikel Arteta came in, which, by the way, was Josh's initial feeling, before he got voted out by the board. But what we did is we sat down, we defined a way of playing with Marcel Lucassen and Per Mertesacker in 2018 from the academy, and we built that up throughout the entire of Arsenal's organization. There was a clear plan in the backroom staff about how to get us back to the top, and we followed these key performance indicators at each step of the way. So this isn't just us getting lucky, per se. And yes, we've got a coach that could potentially be one of the best coaches in the world. But beyond that, we have made sure that there are things in our backroom staff that are in order. We haven't sat there and just recruited somebody else's, like Brighton's entire backroom staff, and hoped that we could just copy and paste something. We made sure to define what we wanted very clearly, and then we made sure that we recruited to that. And this is how we even discuss ourselves in our transfer targets right now. Every single transfer target that we've pursued has been for a specific role, and we always know what it is. And so that fundamentally is the big thing for me. I agree with, Tony here. I'm always somebody that is going to go and sit down and say, listen, how do you build a team? You build it from the back. I agree. He hasn't done that, but I think the biggest issue has happened where Graham Potter doesn't even know how he wants to play. He doesn't know what formation he wants to use. He doesn't even know how he wants his team to play. I don't think there's a person out there that can describe the Chelsea Graham Potter and describe how they play. If you ask what was the successful Klopp team, what was the Centurion Pep team, what was the Mikel Arteta team, you can talk about specific footballing traits. But that is the exact problem. And when you don't have that uniform message,
George, you can't identify rotations. There's no rotations that make sense. You can't say
this, okay, but then again, this is kind of my big point. There's no fabric connecting that club, and everybody has their own ideas. They just need somebody that has a little bit of authority to come in. And I just thought we would talk about it because I think this is going to be a topic of conversation much farther down the line as Arsenal and Arteta become back to title challengers and maybe even title winners by the end of this season, we are going to be compared as the standard for a rebuild. At first, it was Liverpool. Now it's us. But last minute thoughts. I'll go to Chris first.
I was just going to add to that, even on that comment you just put, even the Chelsea commentators, the whole time of the whole game, if anyone watched it today, were just saying the whole team from first team to 18s to 16s, they all play the exact same way, the exact same coaching patterns, inverted fullbacks, 8 high. We play the exact same way. And I think with Chelsea, obviously they've got Webster, Rankin, Harvey Vale, Lewis Hall, some of them elite talents, some of them great talents, like Charlie Webster.
Humphreys.
Charlie Webster is probably one of the best top 5 centre mids talents in England or even in Europe. Like, he's a great talent, but they don't use them type of players. Instead, they're gonna go out and spend 300 mil and then take Sterling out of the team, bring Sterling back.
They can't even do that anymore, Chris.
It's very like, annoying to see Sterling, who everyone thought was going to be their main man, then taken out their team for like 6 games in a row, then brought back in now to start again. Like, it's very inconsistent. And when you keep doing these things, it's obviously going to negatively impact your team. They've got, 30 players in the books? 30 players, and you're trying to have training sessions with 30 people. Like, it's very
you can't even play 11-11. 11 on 11, you still got 8 players left.
But on Arsenal, 24 games now, 14 left. Best away team in the league by 10 points. 1 away loss this season. 2 actually, sorry. 2 away losses this season. But yeah, incredible. Like, I think that was dominance. The goal line should have been a lot higher. It shouldn't have been that close. We should have done more for our goal difference. But yeah, it was dominance. It was great to see such an easy performance. Like, no doubt that we were going to win. And it's just, hopefully we see that again. Really, I think we could add a lot more. And again, me saying us being so dominant and then saying we can add more is just testament to how good we really are. But yeah, dominance is really the word.
And to answer Tony, and then I'm going to give it to Kern for last thoughts, but it's not just stock, it is absolutely evidence, because every single time that Emile Smith-Rowe has played this season, he's cameoed in the right central midfielder department. I've warned it on Twitter, I've shouted it, I've yelled, they called me a nonce. It is coming. As much as you want to fear it, it is coming, my friend. And it is a slow introduction. Of course, he's back fit. We are going to be seeing ESR in that right central midfielder role sooner rather than later. And I'm going to go to Curran. So I'm going to ask you a question, not so much about the title race, but in terms of Everton coming up. And I don't want to get too much in the preview, but after coming off of this kind of lineup and stuff, do you go with Trossard once again? Does he deserve a start, in your opinion? Or do we go back to Eddie Nketiah for this match kind of with Everton? Like, do you think he did enough to kind of warrant himself back in the starting lineup?
I think it depends on Eddie's fitness, to be honest. If Eddie's fit, and he's like raring to go, and he's fully fit, we do need someone that will occupy their centre backs. I do think that will be a good way to do things. But if he's not fully fit, then the rotations are the rotations, and they do well. We've shown that we can proceed with this way of playing. So it would. I think for me, it depends on Eddie's fitness. In terms of final thoughts, look, I mentioned in the tweet when I made it about the injuries and how we've got players coming back. How is that going to affect the team? It's going to be interesting to see when Jesus comes back. I've kind of bookmarked kind of Bournemouth-ish, maybe Palace, for when he does come back. Definitely before the international break for me. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes the dynamics of the team, and will everything just sort of slot back into normal and we go on our charge, or is there going to be some teething issues? We'll see. So I'm interested to see how that happens. You know what that? Just you shouldn't have mentioned Chelsea. You know what I mean? It was just that's.
I'm cutting you off because we finished that segment. But
Yeah.
Look, guys, thank you so much for everybody sticking with us. Make sure you guys drop a like on the video before you guys head out, but make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. You hit that bell for notifications. In terms of all the boys social, you can find me at GeorgeV_AFC. Of course, Chris at CKFTBL, and of course, Curran's at CurranBOP, and we're Ball Over Passion here on YouTube, or at BOP Footy on Twitter. So Thank you guys so much for sticking with us. We hope you guys enjoyed that review. We're going to be back with you guys for a preview of Everton on Wednesday, just before the game. So make sure you tune in. I've got some thoughts about how we can introduce a certain left back into the team. And we're going to need to talk about rotation. Mikel mentioned it in his earlier presser. We're going to be using the squad, and I think that was very pointed. We've got a lot of games coming up, and we're going to have to talk about how we can rotate playing every 3 games. But thank you guys so much. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll catch you guys for the Everton preview on Wednesday. Have a safe one, everybody. Peace.